government contractors, and the other would amend the IRS code to modify calculation of adjusted gross income for purposes of determining eligibility of health care-related programs. The House is now in session.
October 27, 2011. Hereby appoint the Honorable Steve Womack to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, John Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
The prayer will be offered by our chaplain, Father Conroy.
Let us pray. Compassionate and merciful God, we give you thanks for giving us another day. As this House comes together at the end of the week, bless the work of its members. Give them strength, fortitude, and patience. Fill their hearts with charity, their minds with understanding, their wills with courage to do the right thing for all of America. In the work to be done before the end of this session, may they rise together to accomplish what is best for our great nation and indeed for all the world. For you have blessed us with many graces and given us the responsibility of being a light shining on a hill. May all that is done this day be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Johnson.
Will you join me, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain up to 5 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Just ask for 1 minute, revise and extend.
Without objection. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, the President adopted a new campaign slogan, "We can't wait," in efforts to get his $447 billion jobs bill passed by Congress, even after the Senate's rejected it already 2 or 3 times. The President continues to promote his more of the same failed policies like higher taxes and increased spending, and we can't wait for the President to get behind policies that will help the American people. Families and small businesses across the country continue to struggle in this economy. That's why Republicans have passed bill after bill to get our economy moving in the right direction. Today, the House will vote on repealing the IRS 3% withholding rule in order to reduce uncertainty for our businesses and allow job creators to do what they do best, create jobs. I urge the President and my colleagues in the Senate to follow our lead. Get our economy moving forward. Americans want, need, and deserve, no less. Yield back.
What purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut seek recognition?
Seek permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for Americans who are disgusted with the obstructionism of the Republican-controlled House, yesterday President Obama cut through the morass, issuing new rules for student loan assistance, implementing a law that was passed by the last Congress, the Democratic-controlled Congress, the Student Aid and Fiscal Responsibility Act. This program will allow millions of Americans to consolidate their student loans, lower their interest rates, and will also cap loan payments, again, for millions of Americans. And anyone listening can go to studentaid.gov/IBR to find out the new rules of eligibility, which, again, will save thousands of dollars for people who are drowning in student loan costs. Rather than trying to build on that accomplishment, this Congress passed a Ryan budget which would butcher the Pell Grant program and do nothing for people, again, who are racking up huge amounts of student loans. As a member of Congress from the University of Connecticut's district, go Huskies, thank you, Mr. President. Congratulations on moving forward to address the real needs of America's middle class. And I yield back the balance of my time.
What purpose does the gentlelady from New York seek recognition? Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, Paul Manahan from Mahopac, New York, sent the following letter to me. We don't need or want more government spending. Cut regulation, cut taxes, repeal the 2010 health care law, and let business do what it does best. Create jobs based upon demand, not government dictates, spending, and attempts at market manipulation. Well, Mr. Manahan, you're absolutely right. And in fact, our House majority has passed at least 15 bills that now lie dormant in our Senate because the Senate refuses to take action on what would actually create American jobs, lift regulations, create new environments and new opportunities. We are working nonstop in the House majority for all of our American citizens and you, Mr. Manahan, to make sure that you have the opportunity that you deserve and the prosperity that you need. Please urge your senator and all senators across the country to free those 15 bills and get this economy going. And I yield back, Mr. Speaker.
What purpose does the gentleman from Maine seek recognition? Without objection. Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to call to the attention of the American people the fact that last Friday the President signed the implementing legislation for Colombia, Panama, and Korea free trade agreements. My colleagues and the American people might have missed it because that's what the President wanted. The American people don't support more flawed trade agreements, so the President signed them into law quietly. The White House issued no press releases or statements, no photos were taken, no signing pins were publicly handed out. If these agreements are job creators the President promised us that they would be, then why wouldn't he have a public ceremony highlighting the signing of the FTAs? It's because these FTAs aren't going to create American jobs. They might create jobs in Korea and China, but they won't create them here at home. If I were the President, I'd want to keep these agreements quiet, too. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition? Without objection. Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today on behalf of the Congressional Prayer Caucus to note the importance of faith in our nation's history. In his first inaugural address in 1789, George Washington said in part, "It would be improper to omit in this first official act my fervent supplications to that Almighty Being who rules over the universe, who presides in the councils of nations, and whose providential aids can supply every human defect. No people can be bound to acknowledge and adore the invisible hand which conducts the affairs of men more than those of the United States. Every step by which they have advanced to the character of an independent nation seems to have been distinguished by some token of providential agency." And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to ask my colleagues to join me in improving congressional oversight of federal spending by co-sponsoring H.R. 3121, the Reclaiming Oversight of the Executive Branch Spending Act. Too often, Congress appropriates vast amounts of money within broad funding categories and gives the executive branch the freedom to spend it with little oversight. The constitutional obligation to ensure that taxpayer dollars are spent wisely lies with Congress. My legislation would require that all federal spending and loan guarantees over $100 million be explicitly approved by Congress. Had my bill been a law a year ago, Congress would have had to approve the $500 million loan guarantee to the now bankrupt Solyndra, and perhaps we could have stopped that from happening. Today, however, the only real vetting of programs like the Solyndra loan happens after things have gone wrong and the money's been lost. Congress needs to reassert itself and ensure that all programs are properly vetted. The old Carpenter's rule still applies: measure twice, cut once. I ask all of my colleagues to help me end wasteful spending by co-sponsoring the Reclaiming Oversight of the Executive Branch Spending Act, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to remember the service of Arkansas native and Navy Captain Harry Harrison Besore, Jr. of Leawood, Kansas, who died August 2nd, 2011 at the age of 95, and who will be buried tomorrow in Arlington National Cemetery. A distinguished naval aviator, Captain Besore commanded Fighter Squadron 74 off the Jeep carrier USS Quezon Bay in support of Allied forces during their fight against Germany in southern France in August of 1944. He was awarded the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism during low-level reconnaissance missions over enemy concentrations. Like most of America's greatest generation, Captain Besore returned home following the war, became president of a prominent sheet metal firm, was an active volunteer of the Leawood Fire Department, and chairman of the board of trustees of his alma mater, College of the Ozarks in Point Lookout, Missouri. Preceded in death by his wife Shirley, to whom he was married 70 years, Captain Besore will always be remembered by his family and friends for his courage, leadership, and selfless service to his country and his fellow man. And I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask to speak to the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Far too many Americans hurt today. They hurt because of unfair tax policy. They've witnessed, as more and more reports are issued, that the top income strata has seen its income grow by 275%. While those of more modest means have seen a growth that perhaps is some 15 to 20%, and far too many have seen no growth with a flat outcome. They also witnessed no meaningful jobs agenda coming from this House over the last 10 months. Throughout the course of the 112th session of Congress, they're waiting for a jobs agenda. So, Madam Speaker, as the House drags its feet, America struggles. Many struggle to find a job. Many struggle to keep a job. Many struggle to make ends meet. Many struggle to make student loan payments. Many struggle to pay those mortgages. We need to go forward with a progressive agenda that responds to strengthening the middle class, strengthen the purchase power of the middle class. Without a strong middle class, there's not a strong America. With that, Madam Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, during the Texas War of Independence, the enemy tried to remove a cannon from the town of Gonzales. The defiant Texans flew a flag which stated, "Come and take it." Now, in Montana, an intolerant, radical, anti-religious group wants a statue of Jesus taken down from a mountain. The Forest Service is under pressure not to renew a lease for the 58-year-old statue. The statue is more than a religious symbol. It was erected as a memorial and a tribute to Montana freedom fighters during World War II for their bravery, dedication, and patriotism. What's next? Is the anti-religious crowd going to demand the government chisel off the crosses, the stars of David, and other religious symbols on the tombstones of our war dead at Arlington Cemetery? The Constitution protects free speech and freedom of religion. As those early Texas settlers were successful in preventing the enemy from taking that cannon and the right to bear arms, I hope the people of Montana are successful in keeping the anti-religious bunch from taking the Jesus statue. And that's just the way it is.
The gentleman from Michigan seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 448, I call up the bill H.R. 674 and ask for its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 169, H.R. 674, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to repeal the imposition of 3% withholding on certain payments made to vendors by government entities.
Pursuant to House Resolution 448, the amendment printed in House Report 112-261 is adopted and the bill as amended is considered read. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 674.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I come to the floor today in strong support of H.R. 674 to repeal the onerous, job-killing 3% withholding law. While this legislation has 269 co-sponsors, I'd like to acknowledge the leaders on the bill, Ways and Means Health Committee Chairman Wally Herger and our Democrat Ways and Means colleague, Congressman Earl Blumenauer. In addition to these advocates, we also have 25 other members of the Ways and Means Committee supporting this legislation, a clear signal of the strong bipartisan support for repeal of this 3% withholding rule. Job creators know all too well that this provision, like many efforts to increase federal revenue and tax compliance, is lined with paperwork, complexity, and costs, all of the things that hinder rather than help promote a climate for job creation. By considering and passing this bipartisan bill, we will unlock new opportunities for hiring. Job creators have told us just that, and it's why this legislation has the support of a diverse coalition of more than 170 groups, including the Government Withholding Relief Coalition. Like those job creators, others recognize the need for repeal, including President Obama. In the Statement of Administration Policy in support of H.R. 674, the administration noted that, and I quote, "The effect of the repeal of the withholding requirement would be to avoid a decrease in cash flow to these contractors, which would allow them to retain these funds and use them to create jobs and pay suppliers," end quote. Mr. Speaker, I couldn't agree more. Supporting the repeal of the 3% withholding law is a demonstration that Washington can work together. With a strong bipartisan vote, we can reduce the uncertainty facing America's job creators, and we can free up valuable resources businesses can use for hiring. I ask my colleagues to vote yes on H.R. 674 and urge the Senate to swiftly take up and pass this legislation. And, Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to have the gentleman from California, Mr. Herger, control the remainder of our time.
Without objection. Gentleman from Michigan.
I yield such time as I shall consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
I rise in support of this bill. It should have happened earlier. I think most of us, if not all of us, agree that this provision should be repealed. It is not narrowly targeted, and it would indeed impose significant and costly burdens on federal, state, and local governments. I think we should all remind ourselves it was passed some years ago, and it was, I think, misguided when it was enacted in 2006, when we in the minority here did not control the Congress. Indeed, the Ways and Means Committee, when we were in the majority, approved a repeal of the provision in 2009, and the Congress ultimately delayed its effective date. I do want to comment on the title of this bill that refers to job creation, and it should be noted that this is really not going to address the need for creation of jobs in our country. We've been here now 9 months. There is still no effort by the majority here in the House to bring up any meaningful job legislation. And when the President brings up proposals to create jobs, they're thwarted by the majority here and by the Republicans in the Senate. So let's support this bill, but not pretend that it will create jobs. And in this respect, I refer to a recent statement by Mark Zandi, the chief economist for Moody's Analytics, who said this about this bill: "I don't think it's meaningful in terms of jobs. It's more trying to clean up something that needs cleaning up," end of quote. And indeed, this needs to be cleaned up, and therefore we need to pass it. Let me also comment, and we'll talk about this later on the second bill, the pay for. I went before the Rules Committee to ask that there be consideration of a different pay for. What we'll be considering later, and I just want everybody to understand the facts, and each can judge on his own or her own how they'll vote, that the impact of the pay for that came through the Ways and Means Committee majority could cause up to 500,000 individuals to lose health care coverage. I offered an amendment in the Rules Committee that would have offset the cost of a business tax provision by closing a loophole on the business side that's improperly enjoyed by oil and gas industry giants, and unfortunately my amendment was ruled out of order. We'll talk about that later. We're now on this bill. I urge its support. Let's not pretend it's a job creation bill. Let's get busy here on bills that will indeed help to promote jobs in the private sector of the United States of America, as our President has proposed, and he has pleaded that there be consideration by the House and the Senate, only to be responded to with deaf ears. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. I rise in strong support of H.R. 674, the 3% withholding repeal and Job Creation Act. The American people have repeatedly called on Congress to work together in a bipartisan way to encourage job creation. That's exactly what we're doing here today. H.R. 674 repeals a tax that requires government agencies at all levels, federal, state, and local, to withhold 3% of all payments for goods and services beginning at the end of next year. This tax will affect everyone from manufacturers to road builders to physicians who treat seniors on Medicare. Many of these businesses operate on margins of less than 3%, meaning that this provision will harm their cash flow and effectively force them to give the federal government a no-interest loan. Even though it doesn't go into effect for another year, the 3% withholding tax is holding back job creation right now. Coming from a small business background, I can attest that businesses look several years ahead when they're deciding how to invest. This week, the Associated General Contractors of America released a survey finding that nearly half of all construction firms will be forced to hire fewer workers if the 3% withholding tax takes effect. As one AGC member put it, quote, "The way the economy is now, we are very lucky to make 3% profit. This could put us out of business along with our 300-plus employees," close quote. Now is the time to eliminate the barriers that are standing in the way of jobs for American workers. H.R. 674 has the support of businesses, state and local governments, and 269 bipartisan co-sponsors in the House of Representatives, as well as the Obama administration. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from the Government Withholding Relief Coalition signed by more than 150 businesses, healthcare, education, and local government groups supporting passage of this legislation.
Without objection, so ordered.
And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentleman from Michigan.
I yield now as much time as he shall consume to Mr. Blumenauer, who is a lead sponsor of this bill.
Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you. I appreciate your courtesy, Mr. Levin, as I appreciate the opportunity to work with my friend, Mr. Herger, on moving this bill forward. It was only a couple months ago that we were having a press conference in the Triangle with a bipartisan group of members of Congress, representatives from some of the coalition members that my friend Mr. Herger referenced, to be able to focus on the need to repeal this legislation. Mr. Speaker, I think it is important to mark this critical step today. It will pass on the floor of the House in a strong bipartisan vote, reaffirming the bipartisan cooperation that got us to this point. I think that this is an example of what potentially we could do, because a number of the members of the coalition that Mr. Herger referenced and that he's entering into the record are likewise people who have a vision about how Congress and the federal government could help rebuild and renew America. the contractors, the engineers, the architects that we have heard from would also like us to step up in a bipartisan manner to deal with that. The references to people who are dealing with health care. We still face sort of a health care crisis in this country. We may be able to deal with much of it with the health care reform bill, but many of the provisions that are embedded in law now had their core as bipartisan ideas, and I hope the same bipartisan spirit could help us accelerate bipartisan reforms so that the American public benefits in the health arena as well. You're going to hear a little spirited exchange on the floor of the House about how we pay for this legislation, because it has a CBO score that's attached to it that suggests that this will raise revenue. Well, I have two observations that I think are important to note dealing with the pay for. First and foremost, the sad fact is that this bill actually would cost more to implement than it would ever raise for the federal government. But we have a quirk in our scoring rules where they credit revenue, they don't deal with the cost of compliance. And this complicated piece of legislation, were it ever enacted, would require the Department of Defense, the General Services Administration, up and down the federal government, there would be mechanisms to try and impose on it. It wouldn't just cost contractors, hospitals, state and local government. It would actually cost the federal government far more than we would collect. I think one estimate was for the Department of Defense, it would be $17 billion, which would dwarf what would be collected. And we need, Mr. Speaker, as we move forward, to do a better job of thinking about the scoring rules. It's not CBO's fault, but that's how we play the game, and I find it troubling. It also, I think, speaks to volumes about how we operate in the legislative process. This was passed in 2005, kind of dropped in sort of a backroom negotiations. It was never part of regular order. There was no hearing before our Ways and Means Committee to talk about this, because the elements that have been documented in our committee and on the floor about the unworkability of this would never have survived a regular legislative process. Well, I'm pleased that the Democratic side has at least tried to delay and to try and fix this. I'm pleased that we've worked with Mr. Herger in a bipartisan fashion to bring this legislative forward. And I think Mr. Camp and Mr. Levin are committed to regular order, and we've been having, I think, some very productive discussions on major issues. I hope we can keep this commitment to regular order to be able to make sure we don't have something like this in the future that has massive unintended consequences. Mr. Speaker, this is an idea that never should have been advanced in this form. It's been a long road to try and correct it, but today we're making an important step towards that correction. But I would add a note of caution. The same spirit of cooperation and focus that has gotten us to this point will be an overwhelming vote. I hope it's unanimous. We need to keep going so that this isn't a casualty of the back-and-forth process between the House and the Senate. The Senate played a large role in giving us this in the first place. We need to make sure that it is not caught up in the larger dramas that occur around here, that we can keep our eye on the ball and that we can fix it. And I do want to say just one brief word about the pay-for. As I say, it's illusory because it would cost far more than we'd ever collect, but we have to deal with the scoring rules as they are. There are two proposals. One would tighten some eligibility for the health care reform. The other would take away some unnecessary tax benefits to large oil companies that long ago ceased to have any impact on oil exploration or reducing price. But while I actually think that the pay for from our side of the aisle dealing with the oil tax adjustment is superior. I think as a practical matter, we are going to have to do both of these in the months ahead if we're going to deal with our budget problems, reducing expenditure. So I am hopeful that we don't allow the debate over the pay-for to obscure the need to move forward. And as a practical matter, we have big challenges ahead to get our deficit under control. And I think, frankly, that both of these are items that should be enacted into law, I think will be enacted into law. And while there will be a spirited discussion, and I respect the people on both sides, and I think that they will be making good points, I hope it doesn't get in the way of the big picture. So in closing, I appreciate the gentleman from Michigan permitting me to speak on this, his leadership in this. Salute my friend, Mr. Herger. I hope we can mark this step today for what it is, but keep our eye focused on how we deal with these larger issues going forward so we're not back in this situation in the future. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
And I want to thank my good friend from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer, for your support for the lead co-sponsor on the other side of the aisle. Thank you very much. I'd like to take a moment to read a few of the comments that the Ways and Means Committee received from businesses and organizations across the country, demonstrating why repealing 3% withholding tax is critical to laying a stable foundation for job creation. Buffalo Supply Incorporated, a Boulder, Colorado, writes, quote, "We are a 28-year-old small business that sells high-value medical equipment at a low margin with a very significant part of our sales going to the federal, state, and local governments. The 3% withholding tax will exceed our company's tax liability, which will destroy cash flow and ultimately hinder our ability to grow the business and add new employees," close quote. Ian Frost, principal and founder of EEE Consulting in Virginia, says, quote, "If enacted, the rule would mean the withholding of approximately $130,000 of revenue using our projected 2011 revenue. This 3% withholding would essentially be a loan to the government for the year until our taxes are filed. Worse still, it might require our company to secure a loan to help us cover operating expenses at a time when cash in the bank is limited. The withholding could limit our ability to make payroll each month and limit our use of profits to give bonuses to our employees, expand our business, and hire new employees. $130,000 withholding each year would deplete our cash reserves by about 30%, close quote. The University of Illinois notes, quote, "This will add expenses at a time when our university, like many others around the country, is facing reduced state support. We would have no choice but to pass these expenses on to our students, many of whom are also struggling to make ends meet," close quote. The American Medical Association states, quote, "In repealing the 3% withholding provision altogether, H.R. 674 will help Medicare beneficiaries maintain access to care while assisting government agencies, physicians, and other health care providers avoid substantial implementation costs that will outweigh the benefits," close quote. And I'd like to add that at a time when many of us are concerned about fixing the SGR that threatens massive cuts to physicians participating in Medicare and a loss of access to physicians' services for many seniors, the last thing we want to do is add yet another potential cut to physicians' payments. Again, these are just a few of the dozens or hundreds of letters and testimonials the committee received from businesses across the country. We need to pass H.R. 674 and repeal this harmful tax today. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentleman from Michigan.
I now yield as much time as he shall consume to a member of our committee, a most active member of our committee, Mr. Pasquale from New Jersey.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized.
Mr. Lerner. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning. I come to the floor today in support of H.R. 674, which will repeal a burden on government contractors, particularly small businesses. I oppose the enactment of the 3% withholding when a Republican Congress and a Republican administration enacted it, because I knew that it would hurt the economic engines of our economy. The repeal of this requirement will free up small businesses' cash flow, increasing their ability to add jobs and to bid on new projects. This is only a very small part of a jobs plan that could help to reduce unemployment and wage stagnation. The majority has not allowed a vote on known job-creating measures such as the infrastructure bank or funding for our first responders and teachers. So I would imagine that that's not very important, those items. The majority has decided to promote their false 15 bills that attacks clean air, safe water, and consumer safety. Be prepared, America, to eat poison. Not only do independent economists state that these bills do not create jobs, a recent report found that the so-called economically stifling regulatory atmosphere is not as bad as they say. The report says this: the Obama's White House has approved fewer regulations than George W. Bush at this point in their tenures. And the cost of those rules haven't reached the annual peak set in fiscal 1992 under President Bush's father, President Bush I. You would never think that by listening to the propaganda on the other side of the aisle. We've overregulated, supposedly, and we've caused businesses to spend so much money on these regulations. But again, when we look at the facts, this is not true. Eat your words. Even former Reagan Treasury official Bruce Bartlett quoted the Wall Street Journal saying, the main reason U.S. companies are reluctant to step up hiring is scant demand, rather than the uncertainty over government policies. So you can grow as many horns as you want around the President and onto the President. Once again, look at the facts and the statistics. More regulations at this point when former President Bush was the President, Bush II. It is ironic that the majority is adjusting health reform to pay for this legislation. You condemn the Health Act, and then you take the money from the Health Act to pay for this and that. That is a Ponzi scheme, if I've ever heard one. The majority already voted to repeal health reform. Yet to pay for this legislation, which is a separate piece of legislation, health reform must be in place for 10 years. How do they do that? They get rid of the Health Care Act, well, they're trying to anyway, and yet they use every dime for the first 10 years to pay for the first bill. How do you do that? I'm anxious to see how you do this. Just as their 2012 budget was paid for by health reform savings, and we've discussed this in the Budget Committee, this bill is again paid for by the health reform which they want to annihilate. If the majority is against the health reform bill, perhaps they should stop making their agenda so dependent upon it. While I support H.R. 674, we cannot pat ourselves on the back and claim victory, that this is a victory for jobs. Congress must do much more. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Paulson, a distinguished member of the Ways and Means Committee.
Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 2 minutes.
Well, thank the gentleman for yielding. And, Mr. Speaker, I also rise in favor of H.R. 674, a bill that will repeal this ill-conceived 3% withholding rule for all government contractors, including private hospitals that accept Medicare or Medicaid payments, and those who provide even lunches for schools. This is one area in which Republicans and Democrats are working together, as even President Obama singled out this provision as burdensome to our nation's job creators. The President, in his jobs plan, he proposed delaying this rule. You know, the very fact that this rule continues to be delayed, has not been implemented since being first created in 2005, just tells you how bad of an idea it truly is. But we shouldn't just delay it. We should eliminate it and repeal it immediately. I've spoken with many small businesses in my district that will be negatively impacted by this law, because the profit margin for many of these companies that have government contracts is right around 3%. One Minnesota company, Valley Paving, says that withholding 3%, the new 3% withholding law would be catastrophic on their balance sheet, meaning that covering costs, paying bills, and just covering operating costs would be a challenge. And as they point out, during these hard economic times, withholding more money from our small businesses like themselves would mean that they most likely would not be able to update their equipment, not grow as fast, and not be able to hire more people. Mr. Speaker, this goes against everything that Washington should be doing, giving our employers certainty to create more jobs. This law needs to be repealed. Another contractor in my district, Hard Drives Incorporated, pointed out the federal government does not need to be playing banker with our earned income. This law may have sounded like a good idea on paper, but in practice, it will be disastrous. This is made evident by the cost of the program itself. Implementing it for the Department of Defense alone is estimated to cost about $17 billion over 5 years. And here's the irony, Mr. Speaker. The program is forecast to bring in a little over $11 billion across the whole spectrum of government. So the program is going to cost more to implement than it will take in. I strongly urge support of this common-sense approach and bipartisan approach on adopting this bill. The President supports the pay for. I thank the member of the Ways and Means Committee, Mr. Herger, and I ask for his support.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Michigan.
I don't know if the majority has any further speakers.
Yeah, I'm prepared to close.
All right, I'll close.
But happy to reserve.
I support this legislation. It should not have been passed in the first place. It was not vetted effectively by the then majority. It's time. We tried before. It's time to now support this bill. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from California.
I yield myself such time as I may.
Gentleman is recognized.
And I request unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from the President, an executive office of the President.
Without objection, so ordered.
In this letter from the President, it's the administration, just the quote from it, the administration supports passage of H.R. 674, which would repeal a 3% withholding on certain payments made to provide contractors by federal, state, and local government entities. The effect of the repeal of the withholding requirements would be to avoid a decrease in cash flow to these contractors, which would allow them to retain these funds and use them to create jobs and pay suppliers. Mr. Speaker, jobs are the #1 priority of the American people, and jobs should be the #1 priority of this Congress. Many initiatives that are billed as, quote, creating jobs are controversial. This is not. We're repealing a tax that hurts small businesses and that will cost the government more to implement than it collects. This is a win-win-win for businesses, workers, local public services, and taxpayers. I urge all members to vote to repeal the 3% withholding tax and create new jobs now. With that, I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Pursuant to House Resolution 448, the previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. The question is on engrossment in third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to repeal the imposition of 3% withholding on certain payments made to vendors by government entities.
Pursuant to Clause 1C of Rule 19, further consideration of the bill is postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan rise?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 448, I call up the bill H.R. 2576 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 170, H.R. 2576, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to modify the calculation of modified adjusted gross income for purposes of determining eligibility for certain health care-related programs.
Pursuant to House Resolution 448, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, and the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 2576.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to come to the floor today and share my time with one of our committee's newest members, Representative Diane Black. In taking the lead on this legislation, Ms. Black has identified an area of poor stewardship of taxpayer dollars, and she's taken steps to save the taxpayers $13 billion. And I'm happy to support her and this legislation. H.R. 2576 modifies the income definition for determining eligibility for exchange subsidies, Medicaid, and the Children's Health Insurance Program. The legislation conforms the definition of income in the Democrats' health care law to the standards used by other federal low-income programs, such as food stamps and public housing. By aligning this definition with other federal subsidy programs, the legislation ensures that taxpayer funds will not be used to enroll middle-class individuals into Medicaid, which is an abuse of the program's mission, to provide targeted assistance to those who are in most need of help. One of the most encouraging outcomes of Representative Black's legislation is that it has garnered bipartisan support, including the support of President Obama. In its statement of administration policy, the Obama administration affirms its support for passage and goes so far as to say that, and I quote, "The administration looks forward to working with the House to ensure the bill achieves the intended result," end quote. Today I urge my colleagues in the House to vote yes on H.R. 2576. I encourage our colleagues in the Senate to quickly follow suit, and I ask unanimous consent that Ms. Black be designated to control the balance of my time.
Without objection. Gentleman from Michigan.
I now yield as much time as he shall consume to a very distinguished member of our committee, Mr. Crowley from the state of New York.
Gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my friend from Michigan and the ranking member of the Committee on Ways and Means for yielding me this time. Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this bill. As we look at this redefinition of terms under the Affordable Care Act, let me take a minute or two or three and go to the facts on the health care law as it exists today. Some people on the other side of the aisle and in the media continue to refer to this provision that we're talking about today as a glitch. As we learned from the nonpartisan Joint Committee on Tax at the markup of this bill in the Ways and Means Committee, this provision was not a glitch. Again, the other side will make the report that this was a glitch in the law. It was not a glitch. It was written into the law deliberately, and anyone who actually read the bill would have known that. This language was deliberately put into the health care law to expand affordable health insurance and will particularly help early retirees between the ages of 62 and 64, as well as Americans on disability. But again, for those of us who support this law and support the passage of this law, we've heard a lot of distortion, a lot of falsehoods, and outright lies about what is in this bill. That is why I encourage all my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, especially those of you who are new to Congress, who were not here when the bill was passed, to read the bill. I bet that if you did so, you'd like a lot about what is in the bill. There are no death panels in this bill. No government takeover of health care in this bill. And bureaucrats will not be in the operating room with your surgeon. These are all falsehoods spread about the law. And again, people who read the law know that these claims simply are not true. But here is what is in the law. I think we need to be reminded. No longer will insurance companies be able to decide whether or not you or your family deserve care based on cost or profit making. No, these decisions will be made by doctors and patients. That's no glitch. Children can no longer be denied coverage on their parents' private health insurance because of a pre-existing condition like asthma, which is very prevalent in my district in the Bronx. This was no glitch. Children can stay on their parents' private health insurance until the age of 26, which has led to over 1 million more young adults being covered this year. It's no glitch. No mandates on any employer with under 50 employees. None. Zero. No mandating to any employers with under 50 employees. Also deliberate by the writers of this bill. Prescription drugs for seniors are being made more affordable, and this year seniors get deep discounts on their brand name drugs if they fall into the prescription drug coverage gap, a black hole that seniors fall into if they need more than a few $1,000s worth of medications annually, which millions of our seniors do. It was no glitch. No glitch. And finally, something else in this bill. People would know if they read it. Young families with private health insurance can no longer be denied coverage or care under the disgusting term known as lifetime limits. If a young mother gives birth to a severely ill child, no lifetime limits. Yet the practice of telling young parents that not only is their newborn severely ill, but that their private insurance company won't pay for any more hospitalization care because it's too costly. That's over. That's no glitch. Those parents will be able to get their sick child the care that he or she needs without selling their home, without declaring bankruptcy, and without having to fight their health insurance company tooth and nail to provide for their child. Rather, they can focus on their child's well-being. It's no glitch. It's in the law. Democrats put it there deliberately. What I can't understand is why my Republican colleagues will continue to work to rip away health care from private insurance to Medicare and Medicaid. But they refuse to even acknowledge that they themselves benefit from taxpayer-funded health care in this Congress. I have a bill that will require every member of Congress to publicly disclose if they are receiving the taxpayer-subsidized health care benefits that's provided to all federal government employees, including members of Congress. My bill has not been brought up for a debate or vote yet, even though it's a simple bill to make more information available to the American people about the benefits that we in Congress enjoy. But finally, I want to address another serious issue about this bill and how it could affect tens of millions of middle-class Americans. During the committee debate on this bill, it was certified by the Nonpartisan Joint Committee on Tax and Social Security Benefits. Generally, the benefits are generally not added back in determining one's modified adjusted gross income for other benefits that they receive, such as IRA contributions, student loan interest, and adoption tax benefits. But we are changing that definition today for consideration of who can obtain tax credits to purchase private health insurance. I argued, and no one corrected me during that debate, that this bill could be the Republicans' first step on a slippery slope to limit middle-class Americans' ability to claim certain deductions for retirement security, college tuition expenses, and even adoptive assistance. Yes, the first step on the Republican plan to raise taxes on working-class families. And this morning, my fears are being proven correct. Right now, the Oversight Committee is discussing a report they wrote, questions the tax cuts provided to working families to afford health insurance in the Affordable Care Act. They don't argue that the tax cuts are too limited or too weak. They actually argue that the tax cuts are too generous to working families, and that for too many Americans will benefit from tax cuts that will make obtaining private health insurance cheaper. The Oversight Committee report states that the health care law will, quote, take millions of people off the tax rolls, unquote. And let me continue from the report that says Americans receiving these tax cuts in the health care law will have their taxes reduced, and I quote, will no longer pay the cost of government by contributing federal income taxes, end quote. What that means is because the tax cuts in the law will lower taxes for people so they can afford health insurance. Amazing how tax cuts for millionaires are sacrosanct. But tax cuts for working people so they can get affordable health care coverage, so their kids can see a doctor, are somehow evil. Let's end the hypocrisy with respect to health care and Medicare for our constituents, and then the lies about the affordable health care. And let's not pass this bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentlelady from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the customary 1 minute to the gentleman from Virginia, the Majority Leader Cantor.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank the Speaker, and I thank the gentlelady. Mr. Speaker, it is clear that many businesses across this country are feeling the ill effect of the regulatory and tax burdens placed upon them by continued policies coming out of Washington and this administration. Small businesses in particular, the backbone of our economy, face a cloud of uncertainty. This uncertainty prevents entrepreneurs from taking a risk, from starting a business, and from creating jobs. But, Mr. Speaker, House Republicans want to work with our colleagues across the aisle, and we want to help empower these small business men and women to once again begin the engine that drives our economy. This is the focus of the House Republican Plan for America's Job Creators, Mr. Speaker. This is about jobs. There are some who repeatedly claim that they want to vote on a jobs bill. Well, we passed one yesterday on a bipartisan basis, and today we'll have another chance, and we will pass another. Currently, the House has passed 16 bills focused on job creation that are sitting idly in the U.S. Senate. Mr. Speaker, the President has traveled the country telling Americans, quote, we can't wait to pass some job bills. Well, we aren't waiting. We continue to pass job bills. Perhaps it's time for the President to deliver the we can't wait message to the other body in the Capitol. Today, the House will take another step in solving our jobs crisis by repealing the 3% withholding rule. Under this rule, federal, state, and many local governments will be required to withhold 3% of all government payments made to contractors and suppliers. The impact of this rule will be huge accounting burdens on governments and potentially harmful cash flow disruptions for suppliers, contractors, and subcontractors. Those are dollars, Mr. Speaker, that could otherwise be used to grow a business or hire more workers. The cost of this law would then be felt by state and local governments, universities, like Virginia Commonwealth University, that told me it is an unreasonable burden on an institution of higher education. It is an unreasonable burden on dealers and other businesses across the country. Compliance costs would move capital that could otherwise be used to hire additional workers to the government. Many of my fellow Virginians in the county in which I live will be severely impacted. For example, if this law had been in effect in 2000 and 2010, in the county of Henrico, Virginia, an estimated $15 million would not have reached small businesses that are already operating within small margins of profit. Mr. Speaker, this is not the time to be adding additional costs to our job creators. In May of this year, my county manager stated that the effect of this law may also be harmful to the economy, with a significant amount of money being directed to the federal government instead of to businesses that will potentially use those funds to create jobs and grow their business. By passing another bill, another jobs bill, House Republicans are helping companies cope with this era of uncertainty. This is another bipartisan and common sense solution to support the small businessmen and women of our economy so that they can support and begin to regenerate our ailing economy. In this past week, Mr. Speaker, we passed the long-awaited free trade agreements, the Veterans Opportunity to Work Act, and next week we'll further help entrepreneurs access capital with the Access to Capital for Job Creators Act. The President says we can't wait. We agree. It's time to get America working again, and we call upon the Senate not only to act on this jobs bill, but the other 16 that currently sit idly in the Senate. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time.